You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Pseudo-Archaeology Podcast, a show that uncovers what's fact, what's fake, and what's fun in the crazy world of pseudo-archaeology. Hello and welcome to the Pseudo-Archaeology Podcast, episode 154. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, and tonight, the Duende, mysterious forest creatures, and they're coming for you. All right, so what's going on? What's going down? It's nice to be back. It's a new year. I'm recording this, I believe, what are we? January 12th, just barely, because my friends, I'm doing this at like 1 a.m, which is very me. And I love the vibe of doing this late at night, you know, that kind of wheels of steel rolling to the midnight hour. I just dig it. You know, I think it adds that feeling of mystery. I always envision you guys listening to this, you know, like maybe in your car and you're just driving down the lonely highway. You know, that's what I want. Just if you could do that for me, that would be great. And before I get into tonight's story on the Duende, I do want to say that I'm here in Southern California, right? I teach at Moorpark College, which is in, of course, Moorpark in California, and I live in Thousand Oaks. And that's in the Conejo Valley. And we are reasonably close to a lot of the big fires that have just happened. And as of this recording are not out yet, this week is going to have a bunch of new like wind events, they call it, which is just basically it gets really windy. And it is really anxiety making. I do have to say I've been on my toes. I've been on edge for really like the last week or more. And so far we've been lucky here. But this area where I live is classically known for often getting the brunt of some of these, you know, massive fires. So we have dodged the bullet. And I also have to say, when I heard that Pacific Palisades had been so brutally damaged by the fires, it really bummed me out. I used to work in Pacific Palisades in CRM Archaeology, right? So the other podcast I'm a part of is the CRM podcast. And the main CRM firm that I worked for, it was Greenwood and Associates out of Bobby Greenwood's house. Bobby is no longer with us. She was an older woman even when I worked with her years ago. But her house was in Pacific Palisades. So I spent a decent of time there in that community. It really saddens me what's happened there. So I might talk about that, you know, in another podcast or something, my life and times in Pacific Palisades. But it really kind of adds a somber note to the proceedings, you know. And I will say that most of us in Southern California are still on edge because the fires at this point are kind of sort of mostly under control, but the week coming up really has the makings of more fire possibilities. And it's really tough. So many of us have been driving around with our stuff in our cars. Like I still have like most of my, you know, important documents and that kind of stuff in the back of my super sweet Isuzu Trooper, my archaeology automobile, Isuzu Trooper Mark 1. I should probably do that in another podcast too, but I don't know, man. I'm getting pretty frazzled. So I was thinking for tonight, man, I gotta get my mind off this. But it's funny, while trying to get my mind off of it, I'm like, I just thought about the past. You know, I was sort of thinking about my life and times in archaeology, and I thought about, in terms of pseudo-archaeology, this mythology, I guess you'd call it, of the Duende. And the short answer is the Duende they're kind of like a jungle leprechaun. That's what they're like. So in your mind, if you picture kind of a smaller sort of, you think dwarf-like or elf-like or, leprechaun, pick your poison, that kind of trickster figure that's in so much mythology, right? And in Belize, in Central America, of course, they have the Duende. Now, I learned about the Duende in backwards fashion, is as so classic in terms of how I've learned so many things in my life. I learned about the Duende from the local Belizean guys who we would work with on the archaeology project. And so I got it from them first. And it was really many years later that I actually looked it up. What does sort of the academe have to say about the Duende, right? And then that was interesting in its own way, sort of doing the book learning aspect of the Duende last. And enlightening too, because I had heard these stories in a very anthropological manner, in a very just sort of local community manner. And what I'd heard was kind of different, a little different. Bits and pieces, a little different than what is kind of reported. Like if you look up what is a Duende on a Wikipedia page or that kind of thing, I would call it like mostly right, mostly on topic in terms of what like the local Belizeans would say about Duendes. But there's aspects of it that just feel a little different for me. And my stories will revolve around my times with Teo, a man named Teo Williams. And Teo worked with us on the El Pilar project in Belize in the 1990s. So this is another one of those stories, my friends, where we're going back. We're going back in time, man. Teo had worked with Annabelle Ford, who runs the El Pilar project, since the 80s. I want to say his first year was 1984 or something, which was like Annabelle's first year at working at the major site of El Pilar. Very first time. This is going to be one of the first people that she hired onto the El Pilar crew. And so as the years went by, Teo became kind of a mainstay, this local Belizean guy who would work with us. And people like Teo were indispensable, of course, in the jungle because they would see the snake before you. They knew how to live in the jungle. They would teach the students so many important things, like just how to survive day to day in the jungle, how to always make sure you were in the shade. There's little things like that if you don't know any better, you're going to tire yourself out in the jungle. You're going to stand in the sun too much, which is like really foolish. How to cut trails without expending too much energy. So much of being in the jungle is about kind of the ebb and flow of your own energy in your body and not using too much for any one thing, kind of keeping it cool throughout the day. But Teo, though, was a fantastic storyteller and really, I think, very memorable for the students. And I worked with Teo my first 2 years in Belize, which is 1993 and 1996. And I'm in my young 20s. And I thought Teo was like this older wise man. And he was probably 41, at the time, right? He had a bunch of kids. He was sort of, he was like a father, figure at that time. And I ended up working kind of with Teo day to day a lot. And I would like listen to I even ended up spending an evening and spending the night at his house one night. He took me to see the local witch doctor, which is its own story in itself, you guys. When I think back to it, I can't even believe it happened to me. Definitely another podcast I think I'll have to do on, Andrew Kinkella meets the witch doctor of Belize. That was a trip and a half. But I would always listen to Teo's stories and try and take him in and try and kind of remember him. Sometimes I even make notes to myself, to try and remember. And Teo had a lot to say about the Duende, the various stories of this forest creature, this trickster forest creature, and what this creature would do and how to protect yourself. If you came upon this creature, what to do, what this creature had done in the past, and how witch doctors could maybe help if certain things happened because of this forest creature. I wasn't the only one who found Teo's stories like really interesting and dynamic. And actually, a handful of years after I left or I think it was maybe even in 1994 or 5, Annabelle actually, along with a student, Allison Anderson Davies, put together a little book, this little tiny book called Teo's Way. It's really almost just like a pamphlet, like one of those books that has like 20 pages in it, and it's just sort of simply folded together, very small font, but it's just a series of Teo's stories. And I also happened to find my old copy of it, and I was sort of paging through it. And I was like, oh yeah, man, that stuff was so interesting. So Teo told his stories to, Allison, and then Annabelle put them together. And they're also written in Creole. A lot of the life to the stories that Teo would tell has to do with them coming through in Belizean Creole, which is it's like Jamaican. It's like Bob Marley, right? That lilt, that sort of Jamaican lilt. And Teo would, that's how Teo talked. That's how Belizeans talk. So he would tell the stories in that manner. And it's fun to read stuff that's written in Creole too. And I'll give examples of that, as I go through this. But in terms of the specifics, and in terms of specifically what to do if you meet the Duende, well, you're going to have to keep listening after the break.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details. Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hello, and welcome back to the Pseudo-Archaeology Podcast, episode 154. I am your host, Andrew Kinkella, and, well, I must say I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kinkella. Can't forget that. I'm very important. But we have been talking about the mischievous forest creatures, the Duende of Central America, and specifically of Belize, and, of this folkloric creature. And my friend Teo, who I used to work with, and would tell me the stories of the Duende. Now, one of the things, the first story I remember about the Duende is always to show him 4 and 4. You show the Duende 4 and 4. And you're like, what? Show him 4 and 4? That's right. And so what Teo said was, he's like, if you meet this small forest creature, and this is always going to happen, maybe early in the morning or in the evening in the jungle, in a time when stuff is a little bit more mystical, maybe a little bit darker and dimmer out there, and you're alone, and you see this creature just kind of hiding behind a tree, right? Oh, you have to make sure to show him 4 and 4. Do not show him 5 and 5. Do not show him your thumbs. You know why? Because in the words of Teo, the Duende will tease your thumbs. He would say, Andrew man. In Belize, everyone called me Andrew Man, right? he'd be like, Andreman, if you see the Duende, do not show him your thumbs. He will thieve your thumbs by. And what Teo is saying is he will thieve your thumbs. So the first sort of part of this mythology is that the Duende will take your thumbs for himself. He will break them off and take them. So he's this trickster, but he's kind of like 9% kind of evil too. Kind of is creepy. I don't think I've ever seen the Duende named that used in any movie. I don't know. There might be some B movie beyond B movie, but it works as like sort of a low budget horror movie. I'm telling you. So that's the first rule. Do not show him your thumbs. Show him 4 and 4, 4 and 4, or he will thieve your thumbs. Second thing that I remember about the Duende that Teo would say is like they braid the horse's hair. So this is like in the morning, right? It's misty. You go out there and you see the horses. And if their hair is braided, the Duende, because the Duende are tricksters, right? And they will braid the horse's hair. Another thing about the Duende that Teo would tell me about is you'll see this forest creature because of also what they're wearing. They tend to wear like a big jungle hat that's made out of palm fronds, like a big like palm frond jungle hat. And this is actually a real thing. Teo used to make these, and I think he would sell them to some of the tourists and that kind of stuff who would come by El Pilar. They're actually really nice. They're hard to explain, but they look kind of like a normal hat. If you picture a child drawing a hat, they look kind of like that. And they're made with, picture like palm fronds that are like an inch wide, and really nicely woven throughout to kind of make this woven hat. That's even something that I believe the ancient Maya would do. And another really interesting thing about the Duende and how the Belizeans tell the story of the Duende is it's also mixed culturally. What we'll find is there's deep history both on the old world side of the Atlantic and the new world side of Atlantic that's kind of come together in this cultural milieu, which is what we have now. As with so many things in Belize, as I've talked about before, Belize is really a nexus of cultures. You see this mix match, of all kinds of different cultures kind of being there and leaving their mark on the overall vibe of the place. So the Duende will often be wearing this sort of jungle hat. And also, this was a big deal. I heard it lots of times. That the Duende would have pointy shoes, these little pointy shoes, very leprechaun-y, right? These pointy shoes. And also another thing I heard in terms of the feet, and this would depend on the story, sometimes the feet would be turned backwards. It was something about the feet being backwards, or like the legs, like pointed backwards. The sort of odd, semi-human, beyond human, supernatural thing, right? The feet being turned the wrong way, but with pointy shoes. Now, beyond the hide your thumbs, braid horse's hair, pointy shoes, hat, right? There were other things that sometimes I didn't quite understand. It's just like with you can pick any kind of mythology. You can look at different ways the Bible's translated. You can look at, right, any religious mythology, Native American storytelling, and there can be different stories about the same thing that sometimes are incongruous, right? That sometimes don't quite, like both of them couldn't be true sort of thing, but it doesn't really matter because it has to do with the storyteller and the overall theme that they're trying to say. But I remember that sometimes it would seem like the Duende were related to snakes a little bit, but it might have also been that the snakes or snake looking eyes, the Duende may have snake looking eyes, but that also kind of morphed into a story of what Teo called the Ishtabai, which is a more Maya story, which is sort of like a female jungle temptress, right? That would sort of lure you out into the middle of nowhere, into the jungle to get you lost. That's what Teo would tell me that a lot, right? The Ishtabai or the Duende themselves. I think both of these figures, be it the female temptress or be it the more leprechaun, the leprechaun Duende, one of their trickster things was to get you lost. It'd be like, oh, and then you're lost, right? You're lost. And you can see how that is a useful tool for children who live in Belize and live in the outlying towns, because I am telling you, people don't believe me until they experience it, that if you are walking along a trail in the jungle and you take one step off the trail, one wrong step, you can be lost. One step. Because you take one step off, all the trees that you're seeing, they kind of move just a little bit. The angles are different than they were a second ago. And all of a sudden you can't really find the trail again anymore. And then you get further lost. So that's the Duende's fault, right? That's what the Duende has gotten a hold of you. You know, when your mind is wandering on the trail, watch out, because that's the Duende making your mind wander. You know, in more recent things, we in current society, it would be also the equivalent of like, oh, the Duende have taken the sock that you can't find out of the dryer, you know, that kind of thing, this trickster creature. And if you're wondering how else to tell if the Duende's there when you're in the jungle, right? Yes, sometimes you might look and see him, you know, as he just ducks behind one of the trees in the forest. But, you know, like when you're walking through the jungle in the late evening and you're sort of like on edge and you're looking around and you feel the hair on the back of your head come up, you're like, ah, that's the Duende. That's the Duende, right? And you turn around, oop, nope, Duende's faster than you, right? That's the feel of the Duende right behind you when your hair goes up, right? The Duende's coming after you, man. In the worst case, the Duende can even have children, like take children away, you know, like lead children away from the village or children to get lost. And when really bad stuff like that happens, then you go see a witch doctor. And then like the witch doctor can like burn copal. And this is where that's very Maya. The burning copal is a tree sap from the copal tree. And use certain incantations and this kind of thing to force the Duende to bring the child back to where the child was originally lost from, right? So it's all sort of interconnected like that. So it's this trickster deity, almost deity demon, right? That is so useful, as you can see, to use as like a foil or as a storytelling machine in order to give people warnings, to tell people about respecting the jungle, because man, the jungle is a scary place. The jungle is a tough place. You can't be stupid. You got to be on your toes in the jungle. And so while the Duende are trickster forest creatures, they're also helping you out because they're in the back of your head, making sure you do the right thing. And when we come back, what does academia and the internet say about the Duende?
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details. Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
All right. Hello and welcome back to the Pseudo Archaeology Podcast, episode 154. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, and we are wrapping up our scintillating discussion on the Duende of Belize. Now, after just sort of having the, what would you call it, first person knowledge, I don't know, of my experiences with Teo and his stories of the Duende, and not just Teo, other people would tell these stories too, in Belize. The idea of the Duende is widely known. I looked it up, online, and I found a couple things. First, the idea of the Duende is old, and it seems to be originally Spanish in origin, from even like the 1600s, and very related, of course, to like dwarfs, elves, leprechaun, that kind of world, and used in storytelling in that same way in Spain. And then, of course, as people cross for the first time from the old world to the new world, you also get these stories coming in and filtering through too. But aspects of it, as we will get into, are also kind of Maya in origin and just very fascinating. So that aspect of coming from Spain comes up in sort of the academic world. I also looked up Duende. I just searched Duende Belize. And that like little AI generated part that now comes up at the top of your search, which I kind of hate. The whole AI thing freaks me out. I don't like it. But it says that in Belize, they call the Duende the Tata Duende. And I've seen that in other written aspects on the Duende. I swear to God, you guys, I never heard the term Tata Duende used ever. Not once. They say it's kind of, that aspect is Garifuna. And the Garifuna culture in Belize is a straight up like Afro-Caribbean culture. They were originated from a slave ship that crashed in Belize, and the survivors made their own community. But the word up front, that Tata part, which is apparently possibly supposed to mean old, but I don't know. To me, that's not honest to my experience. I only ever heard the Duende called the Duende. That AI part, though, also says for the appearance that the Tata Duende is a 4-foot tall dwarf with backwards feet. I'm like, that checks out. For behavior, it says that the Duende is a mischievous spirit. That checks out. Who enjoys playing the guitar and riding horses. I never heard the guitar thing, but now I realize I'm going to have to do my story on the witch doctor, on meeting the witch doctor. When I'm at the witch doctor, a guitar was in the mix, my friends. And riding horses, that makes the smallest bulb in my brain go off. I think Teo did talk about the Duende riding horses once, but I remember the braiding the horse's hair more. And I could see maybe that braiding the horse's hair also meant that the Duende were holding the horses, by their mane while they were riding them. That I think that could make sense. The Duende lure children into the forest to steal them. Yes, I did hear that. The idea of getting lost, of children getting lost, right? And having a witch doctor come to help get the children back. And then it even has the AI. See, AI is going to take us over, my friends, because the AI even has tips on how to avoid the Duendes. You don't even need me. Just Google Duende Belize and just read. I'm sure the AI can read it for you. Why don't you just plug your brain in to your computer and just like download all the info and stories that are better than my story? Why don't you just? I'm sure you could get an AI Teo to tell stories in Teo's voice, and then you just don't really need me at all. Let's be honest. That's where we're going. So tips on avoiding. Let's see. If you encounter one in the forest, you should hide your thumbs and show your hands. Dude, they know everything. He may mistake you for one of his smaller cousins and let you go. I've never heard that. I never heard that in my life. I never heard that you go like this, and then the Duende mistakes you for his cousin. I never heard that once in my life. Although I do remember Teo saying that the Duende were like dumb in their own way, like that they were like kind of, they're tricksterish and they're funny, but they're also kind of dense. I do remember him saying that. And then here it also says you can also try setting up a guitar and a bottle of rum on a still bedside. Oh, no, sorry. You can also try setting up a guitar and a bottle of rum on a still beside a mirror to scare him away. What? makes no sense to me. I'm sorry. See, AI is fallible. We can take Skynet down, my friends. We can do this. Yeah, you're not going to win, Skynet. Although I do have to say, a bottle of rum was in my story with the witch doctor. More later. So that's funny. Oh, it does also list other creatures of Belizean folklore, include the Ishtabai, a mythical seductress who lures men to her ceiba tree home. The ceiba tree is one of the large jungle trees, which is very obvious when you see a ceiba tree in the forest. It stands out. Very big, smooth bark, symbolic of the world tree. Oh, there's so much there. Yeah, mythical seductress who lures men to her ceiba tree where they meet a grisly end. Yeah, that checks out. And then they have others listed here like La Llorona, which is a female mythological character who you see a lot. You see in Native American stories. And then they even list Anansi, which is Caribbean/African, which is like the spider, which I never heard. I've never heard La Llorona, I don't think, in Belize. Maybe once. And I don't think I ever heard Anansi, or I would remember that. So it kind of half checks out. It's funny. Some of these stories almost seem like bastardizations of what Teo said and bastardizations of what I actually experienced at other times. I'm like, has the AI downloaded stories from my own brain that I barely even ever told? I don't know. But that's the Duende. Sort of mysterious, sort of negative, kind of like the negative side of an elf or a dwarf, or a leprechaun, sort of leprechaun gone bad. It's deep in Belizean mythology. You hear them talk about that. And I always really dug the stories on the Duende. They were some of my favorites. And, it's stuff like this that really helps the days and weeks and months go by when you're in a place like Belize and, you're not from there and you're not a local, but you're not just a tourist either. You're in this weird middle ground. And it's really fun to learn about that stuff and experience it. And of course, on the crew, we used the idea of the Duende all the time. It's like if you forgot your pencil in your backpack, you'd be like, dude, Duende stole my pencil, dude. We used it nonstop. And still, even today, with some of my old Belize friends, I'll be like, oh, beware the mischievous Duende, dude. It adds color to life, man. The world's better with Duendes in it than without. And I kind of dig just thinking back to Teo. And Teo really helped me out in the jungle too, beyond his stories. He was a caring guy, underneath. He loved a crowd and he loved to tell stories, but he also looked out for us, looked out for the students. I think he really enjoyed his time with us. Like, that road went both ways. We enjoyed having him around and he liked having us around. He was also a pretty good cook, and we would get like cooking tips on how to cook Belizean food from him. He was a cool dude, man. I'm so fortunate for my time with Teo. And in terms of the Duende, did I ever personally see a Duende? No. And even though I spent those months and different years with Teo and with other Belizean people who we worked with in the jungle, some of whom did tell me stories about the Duende. Do I believe in the Duende? I mean, even a little. Come on. You were there in the jungle, in the mist, in the late afternoon. And Kinkella, you felt the hair on the back of your neck go up. Do you believe that was the Duende? No. There's no such thing as the Duende. But it's a fantastic story. And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to the Pseudo Archaeology Podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you like and subscribe. And if you have questions for me, Dr. Andrew Kinkella, Feel free to reach out using the links below or go to my YouTube channel, Kinkella Teaches Archaeology. See you guys next time.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Culturo Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.